welcome back to the Colour Cave, where we like to play with art stuff. My name is Jem, and today we're going to go on a little white on black adventure. A week or so ago I took some time to myself, which is very unusual, just to do a pencil sketch in my sketchbook, and I have drawn this rather tired looking lion. He's obviously just had enough of the day. I had such good fun drawing this and I really wanted to do something else with it. I didn't really want it just to stay in my sketchbook. So I am going to use this as a reference image for a piece on black paper. So here I have my Artgecko sketchbook. I absolutely love the paper in this, and I've always had a bit of a fascination with drawing on black paper. So I thought this guy would be perfect to try out on this paper. The original reference photograph that I used was from a lady called Vicky McDonald, and she actually took the photograph of the original lion, which is this one here. So I've got that plus my own sketch to work from. I have changed details from the original photograph into what I've done in here. I just made his eyes a little bit bigger and moved the angle of his head slightly, just basically to suit the space that I had in my sketchbook. So I'm going to be using my own image as a reference, but if I start to get a bit tangled up in my brain with what should be white and what should be dark, I do have the original photograph there just to kind of refer back to. So in your head you have to invert what you're doing. With pencil we would normally put in darker areas and we would preserve a highlight because that would be the white of the paper, but we're doing the opposite here, so we're actually drawing in the lighter parts and using the darker parts to be left alone. So the tools that I'm going to use for this today primarily are just 3 items. I have a Caran d'Ache Luminance pencil here in white. This is the Mac Daddy of white pencils as far as I'm concerned, and it's the one that comes out best on this particular paper. Lots of people have the debate about what's the best white pencil to use. It does depend on the paper, and I've tried pretty much everything. And I like to go back to this because it's soft enough that you can blend it away, but it keeps a point so that you can put in details. And obviously we're going to be dealing with fur, so that's quite important. I have a white pan pastel here, so this is a soft pastel in a pan form, and this is for covering larger areas as well. It's quite forgiving, you can erase it really well, and these are well worth the money if you use them on a regular basis. I've also got a white Posca pen here, and it is a little weeny nib. This is a 1M, so it has got it's got a rather small tip in it. Now in preparation for this, if I just tilt this, you can see I have put a very light graphite set of lines down, and that's just my guidelines, and all I've done is stick them down as I would in a normal sketch and then lightened up. So I've taken off as much of the graphite as I can just with a kneaded eraser in order to get started. So I find that the best way to do this, being left-handed, is to start at the right-hand side of the page. You will get marks, you will get smudges, but obviously we want to minimise that as much as possible. Because of the ring binding here as well, I find it difficult to sit with a piece of paper under my hand as well because it just gets caught up, and if the paper moves it will still smudge what's underneath. So you know, you've just got to kind of go with it. I would draw an imaginary line down the middle of the page and work on this side first. And that means I'm not going to be working over the top of that and just gradually work my way across. We're not going to get the whole drawing done today because these things take time, but I would like to just share with you some of the steps I'm taking. Now the light source is mainly on this left hand side, which is one of the reasons that I picked this picture. So we are going to be putting most of our medium down here. Again, that is going to be the last thing I do, so I'm less likely to smear it about the paper. And the way I do it is I start by picking out the lightest patches. So straight away there's one round his eye here. It's like little tufts. So we're just going to get that in. So all I'm doing here is giving myself some reference points so that I can start working away. And this section under the eye as well, there's quite a lot of light down under here as well, and that's quite common in mammals, especially, you know, very furry mammals. They tend to have paler colours around their eyes. So that's me sort of marked out that eye area, and then I'm just going to start taking some of this pan pastel, and I want to, he's got a kind of widow's peak going on, so I want to maybe try and avoid that. So this is just like the lightest dusting of the pastel. And even when I'm making these marks, I'm thinking about the direction of the fur. And he's got a kind of tufty bit there. So I'm just marking out all these highlighted areas here and then the lighter parts. I still haven't dipped this cotton bud back into the pastel. I'm still just working with the same amount because we're going to build this up as we go along. And then we've got another quick dip here. Okay, so when I'm leaning, I'm actually resting my wrist on the rings here, and that helps me to not lean on the actual paper. And we just need to start thinking about this outside edge. As I say, I'm going to try and work as methodically as possible. So we'll start with his mane here. And his hair seems to more or less stick straight out from here. So I talk about these flicky motions a lot, and that's exactly what I'm doing. And I'm not coming all the way down into this dark part all the time because his fur is quite dark in there. So off to a good start there. And down here, this is where it starts to get interesting. He's got this sort of tuft that comes out. So every time I'm putting more white on the paper here, I'm always thinking about the direction of his hair flow. So every stroke is going in the direction that his fur is growing in. So then there's a darker section here in the middle where his hair kinks in like this, and then it sort of picks up again slightly underneath. And then we're down into his mane. So just start to put in some contours here as well. I try not to make this too complicated for myself, but I tend to think in like 2 layers. So I think about the shading, which is what's going to give you the contours of the face, and then I think about detail on top of that. And it depends on the paper. Sometimes you can do a base layer with your pan pastel or any other kind of pastel, and you can spray it with fixative, and then you can go back in with a pencil in your next layer once that's dry, as long as you're using a workable fixative, and you can really start to put in all the detail. It's entirely up to you, but I tend to sort of jump back and forth. I'm not terribly experienced in working on black paper, but I've got a bit of a fascination with it, and I quite enjoy it, so, you know. And we can build this pastel up as well. So again, it's just like, I always say it, and I say it all the time when working in pencil as well. You know, if you go gently to begin with, you can always build it up. The plus side of this is, though, it is easy to erase. There's not an issue there. Okay, so I'm thinking about his eye in here. Just sort of mark out that shape. So at the top of his eye, there's like some lighter hair. And then it's pretty dark after that. So you can see that just by making that line a bit more defined, you can actually start to see the shape of his eye. And then we'll start to pop in this lighter value here. And again, we'll work away at that. I'm going to bring it round. And this is the top of his nose. So this area on top of his nose is quite dark. And it's quite scarred as well. So, you know, I think he's maybe been in a couple of altercations. And then we've got his nostrils here, which are really, really dark as well. So again, all I really want to do here is just sort of lay down a little bit of this, and we'll blend this out as we go, just so that we can see where that nostril shape's going to come in. That's so funny because this looks like nothing at the moment, but I promise it'll come good. I'll be all right. The other thing as well that's really nice is that you can, if you've kind of overworked your paper, which I had a tendency to do in, you know, like the first couple of times, you can always go in with a black Posca pen or a black coloured pencil, you know, if you've kind of like mashed the paper a bit too much. Okay, so we want to start working on a little bit of the detail now. All I'm doing here is going back over the parts where I've put the pastel down, and I'm just starting to put that sort of little bit of detail in. And we want to put his pupil in as well. So I'm just going very carefully here with my electric eraser. And I'm just tapping the paper. Now this is great because it goes round in a circular motion. You can get that nice circular feel to it as well. So So if you just tap very gently, you can work your way out. And you can see we've got quite a good eye going there. So I'll just turn this round so I'm not putting my hand in it. Sharpen up my luminance here. And then we can really start to work on some of these. One thing I am deliberately doing here is I wanted to make the eyes wider. So he still looks like he's yawning, but he's kind of half roaring because these eyes are wider. I just feel like the eyes are such an important part of the picture. And I didn't really want to lose too much of that. So, but this is what working from reference is all about. You know, you don't want to be carbon copying a picture of any description, because that's really what it becomes, is just copying. Then you're not actually you know, putting your own stamp on it, so to speak. And when you're learning, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Really, there really isn't. But for the likes of myself, who's got a better grip on things in general, I want to make something my own and really make it, you know, make it come to life. So we've got this darker area here, so I'm not pressing as hard, but I still want to lighten this up. And say we'll do this gradually. And he's got this little tuft here. This is like his widow's peak. It's very cute. No, well, I don't know what's cute about a lion that's that's showing you its teeth, but I think he's cute anyway. But this kind of comes down like this, and it's a little bit darker. It's the old flicky motion. Okay, so down round his nostril here, we're just kind of working my way down a little bit. And we've got these big nostrils, so we're going to outline them very slightly. So I'm taking the clean end with my cotton bud now, and I just want to really soften this out. And again, we don't want to press hard because you're just going to flatten the tooth of the paper. So we just want to give it a little rub. It's like he's got a scar down here as well. And this slightly paler part around here. Now this part in here, this is the start of his mouth here. So this part around here is actually really pale. So I just want to smooth this out a little bit. And this is an area that we're just going to work with the pencil. Now there are the sort of spots where their whiskers start to come out, and I'll probably put them in with a black coloured pencil. So this is just about time and patience, and it's one of these things that normally I'd go and walk away for a little while and then come back to it. You know, just do a wee bit at a time. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. So this top part of his nose, obviously that it is furry to a degree, but it's not hairy, if you see what I'm saying. So when I'm working in here, I'm just working in sort of light and shadow here. I don't want to detract from the hairiness of the rest of him. So I'm working more in little circular motions here, and it's just so I can get the geography of his nose and all these kind of scratches and things that he's got. Bless him. Okay, now there's quite a defined black line down here. So I'm just got, this is the Faber-Castell Perfection eraser. So I'm just going to use that to like sort of cut a line. Now the problem with this eraser is it does damage the tooth of the paper, so I don't like using this all the time. And there you go, you can see how that line's cut through there. That's much better. That's exactly what we want. And I'm just going to go back to my pan pastel here, because this is a sort of softer area down here. It's not quite as white. And we'll just go gently with the pencil here. Okay, so we're kind of starting to look like a bit of a lion here. A little bit of a lion. So I'm going to come back and work on these parts now. There's a lot of hair here, so maybe I want to put that in first. And this part's quite white. And this part needs to be much whiter too. I shouldn't really say whiter, I should say lighter, shouldn't I? And the same under his eye as well. And then it's almost like the edge of his fur here, he's got like it's almost like a little halo that goes all the way around. The fur is really pale at the top of his head. And then where his mane comes out, it's like he's not had his roots done. He's needing to go for a bleach job, because they're very dark in there. So you can see that by using the cotton bud, I've just softened that out really nicely. And it's a really nice effect when you've got the pencil down there already, because all you're doing is you're just building up like dimension to the texture. And I think personally, for me, that's one of the hardest things about drawing animals. And I mean, animals are my favourite things to draw. There's no denying that. It's difficult, but I find it quite rewarding. So I'm just like stopping at the edge of his widow's peak here. I don't want to take this too much further, because that's the centre line of the actual drawing is just here. So I don't want to bring this too far over just yet. I don't want to get overexcited with myself. But I'll pop a little bit of this in here. And see, this part of his nose is actually quite dark. But what happens now is, as we build up the layers of white, obviously this part looks darker, like the contrast between the two becomes more apparent. And that's really what you're wanting. That's what we're looking for. So I need to try and maintain this ridge here though, because he does have a little line there that I've kept in. I think it just makes him look a bit meaner. Just real mean. And the hair down here, this is like the bottom part of his mane, so it is very fragmented and sort of straggly and almost dry looking. So basically, in order to build that up, all we've got to do is just keep going over it and make sure we've got that kind of sort of crinkly texture in there. But that's one of those parts, like once you've finished the rest of your drawing, you can go back and do that as many times as you want. And it actually sometimes helps to use a sort of zigzag line like this when you're putting it in. And that just helps to give it that sort of drier looking texture, but you don't want to do that with every single strand. Okay, so down here, there's this sort of bottom part of his jaw as well. So his tongue's coming out here. And I've just used that as a guideline. So where his tongue sort of, you know, the middle part, like the cleft, that kind of lines up with where the bottom line of his actual jaw is. And again, the hair seems to be considerably whiter there. So we're going to do that, because we want our big chap to have a jaw. It would be a little bit unfair for him to not have a good jawline. Again, just marking this out with the pan pastel. And it's a really fun and nice way to do it. Gives you really nice guidelines. So we've got this line of hair here. And the rest of this under here is like this part. And interestingly, much as the likes of the eye is one of the first things I want to put in, whiskers is usually last. That's the kind of thing I like to leave until the end. Okay, so you can now see like the clearly defined area that's his nose just by joining that up. And that's the thing with this, a lot of it is you've got to remember that although you are drawing an object, all you're doing is joining lots of lines together. And I think that really helps, and I think that's something that will probably help me if I was ever interested in doing portraiture, you know, human portraiture. I think that's probably, rather than thinking about a face or you know, a this or a that would be the way for me to do it, is just think in terms of shapes, because that is essentially what you're doing. Is say something simple like joining that line up has brought, you know, a part of the drawing to life kind of thing. So I'm just going to continue on here and work on some of this hair area. It's not very exciting, but it's what we need to do. Okay, I think we're looking pretty good for now. Again, I'll probably come back to this at some point and keep tweaking, especially this area there, but sometimes it's easier to see once you've finished, you know, like most of the drawing. So we're going to move down here now to his mouth. Now this is where things get tricky, because there is a lot of dark. Obviously we've got like the maw of his mouth. So we've got this this line here, and this sort of tapers off to like almost nothing. And then this cavity here is obviously his mouth. So what I need to do now is just sort of map in the top side of the tongue. The tongue was the part that I really needed the reference photo most for, because I didn't realise how complicated the tongue is when it's you know, when it's curled over. It's pretty weird. So we're gonna just we're just gonna mark this in again with the pan pastel, because it's super strange. It really is. It's actually kind of creepy. Oh my goodness. Okay, so we do want quite a defined edge though. So we've got the edge of the tongue like here. and it's paler on this part here. And that sort of disappears off into nothing into his mouth. And then we've got this edge that's very, very pale. And this sort of comes round like here. And then there's the bottom section here, which is also very, very white. And that sort of disappears in behind there as well. Don't know if that looks like a tongue or not, but... The other thing I've done as well is I've exaggerated the width of the mouth, like I've made it much, much wider. So if I just zoom out a little bit, his mouth's going to be like this big, so it's like, whoa! And that's just purely for fun, there's no other reason. So again, it's easy to put the white in first, so I find it easier to put this tooth in and just sort of mark that in. So that's just another marker for me to, you know, just so that I can map things out in my mind. And underneath the tongue here, we've got his lip, which is quite interesting. I've never paid a huge amount of attention to something like that, obviously. Not something that I would tend to look at when I'm looking at drawings of big cats, but they have really thick lips. And then it comes down at this sort of, you know, jaunty angle again, because he's having a bit of a yawn. It's actually quite funny. It makes me laugh watching the cows yawn as well, because they kind of like do this with their jaw, you know, it kind of, yeah. It's very amusing. I am easily pleased. So what that lets me do now is it lets me start putting in the sort of hairy chin part. So this is interesting as well, because the hair here is very soft looking, but it's also very white, very, very white. And then there's this sort of like, there's like a semicircle here that's just that little bit darker. So that's enough of a marker for me to be getting on with now, which is great. That's exactly what we want. Now where the tongue comes round, this part sort of comes down. And then this is like sort of into the, you know, the sort of the under part of the tongue. I can't remember what it's called, but like the soft palate underneath. And the rest of this part in here's pretty dark actually. So again, there's a very defined line round here, like a dark line. So I'm just going to use my white pencil. Okay, so just adding a wee bit of shade into the tongue here. Now this part that comes round starts to flatten out a little bit and then disappears off into nothing as well. And then there's the second part which joins into this part we were talking about earlier. And then there's a whole hodgepodge of stuff going on down here, but what I want to do is I just want to pop the teeth in first. And for some reason, and I noticed this when I was doing the rough sketch, these little teeth in the middle here at the front, they're really, really white compared to everything else, which I find quite amusing. And then here, just a part of the underside of the mouth is actually quite black. And I noticed this with my dog's teeth as well. You know, like their gum line round about it, they do have black parts of their gum and then they've got the pink parts. So I want to make sure I'm getting that in. Again, never really thought about it with cats, not being much of a cat person anyway. We did have a cat at one point, but... And also obviously not in the habit of looking inside the mouths of cats of this size, you know. Again, there's parts that are lighter and parts that are darker. And then we've got this sort of interesting white, sort of jagged type highlight down the front as well. Now that seems like quite a stark comparison, you know, it goes from dark to light really quickly there, so I'm just going to take out, again with this Faber-Castell eraser. There we go, that's a bit more graduated, looks better. So I now need to just join up this lighter section, because just now it looks like two very separate parts, and they do to an extent. I've had to put a cardigan on because I'm really cold, but now I'm dipping my sleeves into things. But it needs to just, and it was a bit like what was going on down under here as well. It's, you know, it still needs to be cohesive and join up with the rest of the drawing. So we can just soften that line, and we can still clearly see that that part is lighter, but it's just not quite as obvious. And you can see that there's a ridge there, you know, that's definitely there. And I want to put a little bit in here. So we've got this part of his tongue that's come round. And that's taken us more or less to the middle there. And this little bit in his chin down here, there is hair there, but it's a lot darker. So I just want to add a bit more texture to his mane. He's still looking a bit too soft and silky here for my liking. So just going on to the side of my pencil a bit more. I'm still using similar sort of shapes, but obviously the line's a lot broader and coarser because I'm using the side of the pencil. Maybe get some kinks in there, you know. I don't think he's a L'Oreal Elvive kind of guy. Okay guys, I think we'll just stop there. I would say that's probably about half. I think we're doing good. And the next video will be the second half of this, and we'll get them all finished up and looking handsome and scary and tired and all these things all at the same time. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed yourself today. I hope you've learned something. I've had really good fun. This is, like, I just absolutely love stuff like this. It's an animal drawing. I have this fascination with drawing white on black, and it's something that I really strive to get better at because I haven't done a lot of it. And I was actually looking in this sketchbook, and the last thing that I drew was the Zippo lighter, and that was in November of last year. So it's been nearly a year since I've done any white on black in this sketchbook. So, you know, it's nice to see how my skills are coming on, but if I had more time, it's something I'd love to do more often. Anyway, that's enough of that. I hope you've enjoyed yourselves. Thanks very much for watching. I appreciate all of the support, guys, and I'll see you back in the cave on Sunday for the second half of this drawing. So have a really good day, everyone. Bye for now.